when I ride this bike, I get a lot of people like, wow, you know, when I rode it to Sturgis, you're like, you rode that from California? And my response is, yeah, of course. I mean, people rode these in the 70s cross country and the 60s, and they're not as uncomfortable as you think. They're actually pretty darn comfortable. The stance of it actually makes it incredibly stable, performs really well in the canyons and stuff, surprisingly. There's a nice sweet spot that these motorcycles have. You'll talk to any guy that rides a rigid frame old motorcycle, especially an old one. There's a sweet spot that they have. And right around whatever, it might be between 50 and 70 miles an hour, but right around there, and sometimes it's even faster than that, everything just sort of vibrates right all at the same time, and it's like this sort of perfect note, you know, whether it's a nice low C note or something. And it's a unique experience that you won't get on any other motorcycle. And it's hard to explain to people that have never ridden these and never ridden these for any real extensive miles, and there's nothing like it. I love all motorcycles. I've ridden new ones. I've ridden big, nice Harley-Davidsons and lots of miles, and that's good too, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a different experience, and for me, personally, this is the most profound experience for me that I could ever have on a motorcycle. It gets you closer to the road. It gets you closer to all the things I think that matter when riding. Hey, this is Caleb Owens from Cro Customs, and this is my 1966 Harley-Davidson Shovelhead chopper that I affectionately call Uncle Sam. The original version of this chopper I built a couple of years ago, and I rode it around raw. In other words, it was unpainted, and I rode it thousands of miles, New York to North Carolina, San Francisco, Sacramento, all over the place. Rode it to Sturgis and back, and I loved the bike. A year and a half ago, I got clipped by a car in Hollywood on this particular bike, and bent the frame really bad, bent the front end really bad, and beat me up pretty good. I broke my right leg from the knee down, got a rod in there, and ended up getting a blood clot. It was pretty nasty, so I literally almost died twice. And I was involved with Born Free again. These guys at Born Free asked me to do another bike. I wanted to try to do something that at least tried to recapture the spirit of what building an old chopper was all about. I decided to rebuild the bike that I crashed, and I decided to kind of do it in a slightly different way. And the slightly different way was that I recruited a handful of guys to collaborate with me or to help me on specific parts of the bike. And I did that for a lot of reasons. And I could have easily tooled away in my garage, and like I always do, and do it myself. But I felt like that's not what old motorcycles and old choppers in particular was all about. It was always about drumming together parts and friends helping friends, and you know, whether you're trading a part for something or whether you have a friend that has a welder, maybe you don't have a welder, whatever the story is, you always kind of find somebody else to give you a hand, and especially something a little bit more meaningful as far as getting a motorcycle back on the road. So that was part of it. Initially, the frame was pretty drastically destroyed and bent, and I was going to scrap it all together. And so I reached out to a guy named Brandon Casquillo, and he runs a place up in Richmond, California, called Mullins Chain Drive. And we got right away, and we put the thing in the jig, chopped it all up, and we ended up amazingly saving my frame, which was much worse than I thought. And Brandon was amazingly generous with his time, and more importantly, I got to know him pretty well during that period, and learned a few things from them, and it was a really, really neat, enriching experience. And then when it came time for the gas tank, I reached out to Cole Foster. Cole Foster is really well known in the hot rod industries. So we spent a good 2.5 days at Cole's shop shaping the tank. And again, learning some great skills from Cole and realizing some tools that I need to get in order to kind of bring up my metal shaping skills. And we tacked the thing together, and I came back and finished it up. So I'm pretty happy with that. Again, another amazing experience with that. So the motor had a lot of miles on it, and I ran the motor really hard, and so I was totally expecting the motor to need a full rebuild from the ground up. So again, I recruited a guy to work with me on that, a guy by the name of Kurt Morrow. He owns Morrow Vintage Customs here in Ventura, and really well-known motor guy. He's been doing motors for a really long time. We pulled the motor apart, and to my amazement, the lower end was really, really clean, and bearings were great, and so we ended up just having to do a complete top end on it. So I worked with Kurt doing that. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to do this illustration on the gas tank of Uncle Sam, this illustration I've had for a while. And I didn't want to do it airbrush. I didn't want to do it with any other kind of paint that typically looks like custom paint on a bike. I wanted to do something different and unique. So I did it all with colored pencils, which sounds crazy. So I spent about 36 hours doing the artwork on the tank of the Uncle Sam. This is all done by hand. I did all the artwork on that. And when that was done, I had to end up doing some experimenting with the colored pencils because it's a very hard, obviously, metal surface. So once it basically maxes out. There's only a certain amount of colored pencil you can get on there before it just starts getting muddied up, and you can't put more on there. It just maxes out. So I had to come up with these techniques to blend it and make it work. And so I did a bunch of experiments and finally figured something that worked pretty well. And then once that was done, we had to clear it. And that was sort of the big question mark. We didn't know if the clear was going to decimate the artwork. So we had to do some tests with that as well. And so we ended up finding that we could do a really good brand art clear first, and then go back in with the epoxy clear, and it works really well. So I'm pretty stoked with that. Yeah, handlebars I made these handlebars, handmade. The base of this handlebar is it's a crow's nest clamp. I manufacture these. I cast these and have them made. I designed this a few years ago. I have them cast and made. I sell these, and then I also use these to make these handlebars specifically for springers. And I made this set, and this is a set of what I call my lane splitters. And I make these and sell these in different different lengths and styles and stuff. The top part it's just a turned down nut. Stem nut that I put in a little nickel in there, buffalo nickel in there. The front end is originally it was an early Harley-Davidson front end, probably, I'm not really sure, but early 40s, I'm guessing. This was extended originally, it's about 10 over, but this was done by Buchanan's, Buchanan Spoke Company. Now they're really well known for making wheels and spokes. And it's Buchanan's by the way they extended it. Very few extended springers do you see that have this piece here. Usually it's done with like a Ford radius rod. I have another one over there you could look at that's got the Ford radius rod traditionally. So I picked this up from a good friend, and it was in really good shape, beat up a little bit, but I narrowed it. So I took a good 1.5 inches on either side, shrinking it up, which some guys would find a little sacrilegious, but given the nature of how rare the front end is. But for me, I wanted something really different. So having a Buchanan's that's narrowed, I'm not really, I don't know of anybody else that has one, so at least not yet. The motor is, again, a 66 Harley-Davidson generator shovel. I've had it for a long time. It's fired by a Morris Magneto. This is another part I got in trade for some work. So this is what kills the Magneto. It grounds it out. And I do this because I can ground it so the bike is off now. And so I can kick through it if it gets flooded or something like that. And then when I want to run the bike, I put right there like that. Chopper stuff, man. Carburetor is an SU carburetor. This carburetor has always been with this motorcycle since I bought the bike. And I bought the bike, oh my God, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. And it ran really, really good. So I didn't want to mess with it. I've never had one problem. I know there's some people that have issues with SU carburetors, but this thing runs so good, it's ridiculous. The air cleaner cover is the top off of a juicer from the 1950s. And it's not anything anybody hasn't done before. You take like an orange juicer and take the top off and make a backing plate for it. What was different about this one was when I had done this before with a different brand of juicer, like Juice-O-Matic. And so I looked for some off-brands of the time, of the period, that were competing against Juice-O-Matic, just to have a different shape. And so I found this one. And this was, I thought the shape was pretty interesting. It's called Juice King. So all I did was take it off, gut the inside of it, and then I nickel plated it, and I made a backing plate for it out of aluminum. I had this tool bag. It wasn't even really a tool bag, but it was a little leather bag that I used on the old bike. And so when I got in touch with Danny at Crazy Heart, I said, hey, let's make a bag that fits in this particular area of the bike because I'm not using a big saddlebag or anything, and it works perfectly there. So Danny helped me design, or he basically designed this thing. And so this is my tool roll, basically. So I got all my tools in here, and they're all rolled up as well. So it's really, really nice. It's got an extra little snaps on it that hold it in place, and then I also got extra little ties so it doesn't slide up and down. He did a really, really good job. Pretty happy with that. So the fender is an old trailer fender, actually, and a lot of guys in the heyday of choppers would use trailer fenders. Number one, you could find them in junkyards for nothing, or if you bought them, they cost next to nothing, and that's still pretty much true now. So you can find a trailer fender, which is square, obviously, and I think I got this one at a swap meet for $2. And they're really heavy steel, and they make great motorcycle fenders. So I narrowed it. I took about, I'm guessing, I can't remember, maybe a ½ inch or so out of it. And then I narrowed it, and then I added this little duck tail or duck, whatever you want to call it, out of it, just to give it a little fun shape to it. And the rear wheel is Firestone. It's good. These are good tires, actually. They work pretty well. And this is an Acron. It's an 18-inch wheel. And this is a 1.95, I think it is, the rim. 1.98, I think. And with a star hub. It's aluminum wheel, stainless spokes. It's a star hub, original Harley-Davidson star hub with a juice drum brake on the back. Original Harley-Davidson. That's original 60. Actually, it might be earlier than that. I think it might be a pan head brake. The artwork right here. When I decided to do the bike the way I was gonna do it, and sort of have my friends kind of pitch in a little bit. Guy that did my tattoo, actually, which is a tribute to my dad. He sent me this little design, and so I took to the design and I put it on the oil tank with colored pencil. His name is Simon Watts. He's the guy that designed it. The shifter arm is, the jockey shifter is just a handmade out of round bar, machined, and had a little fun with it and bending it and shaping it, whatever. The shifter knob is kind of interesting. This is an old doorknob. It's a brass doorknob, What's interesting about this is, most people wouldn't know, is that was once, actually not once, but that was designed by Howard Hughes, that doorknob, believe it or not. And here's the story. And if somebody comes to my house looking for this doorknob, I'm going to tell them they're full of shit. So here's the story. I worked at the old Howard Hughes building. It used to be his offices in Hollywood off of Romaine over in Santa Monica. And it was an interesting building, and they were doing renovations on the building. So I did some research on the building just for curiosity. And I found out that Howard Hughes was intimately involved in every part of the design process of the building, even down, and this is a quote from the article, even down to the brass fittings on the doors. A few weeks later, when I was leaving, one of the guys that was working there, I asked him, I said, hey, where was the theater where Howard Hughes had his famous, meltdown? And he goes, oh, it used to be that room right there. So a few days later, when I was leaving, I went by that room, and in the room they had the door on the ground and all of the brass fittings laying on the ground. And so somehow I ended up with that brass doorknob. So that's a brass doorknob that was on the door to his theater. It's a very crazy story, but it's true. And this is original Harley-Davidson shifter plate, everything. What's interesting about this is this is actually the original shifter peg from the original bike, 1966, and I had it in a box. I'm not using a shifter peg, I'm using a foot clutch. So what I did was I took the original shifter peg and I made this piece on the back of this mount. So this is all not stock, and I mounted the peg here so I can rest my heel on this as I'm actuating the clutch. Again, it's a goofy thing. It's originally with the bike. It's a part of the history of the bike. I felt like it sort of needed to be there. And plus, it's all beat up and old, and it's got some character, and I dig that, Only really interesting thing about this is just a stock little British-style petcock. And this little thing here is actually a turning signal indicator button, if you will, off of a 30s era Packard. And a friend of mine he used to live in a place where he had this guy was eccentric, and he had all kinds of cars laying around everywhere, and they're just rusting, going to hell. So I reached in there and grabbed a handful of these things and pulled them off of the cars. And so I cut it and modified it and make it fit for the petcock. Just another little piece. Again, it could easily be something that was custom made, but it's not. The big thing about choppers and this kind of old stuff is you personalize it. You add your own touch to it and your flavor to it, and that's what makes it personal. You're expressing yourself in little pieces, I guess, and you're making it uniquely yours. That's the whole thing about choppers. The whole idea behind choppers was, this is uniquely mine. Nobody else has a bike like this, and that's kind of the basic idea with all that stuff. And then you carry over that obsession to all kinds of little stuff. You start, modifying generators, or you start modifying foot pegs, or, you can't leave well enough alone. You chop everything, is what they say, Yeah.